Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Frontish Podcast. So, today we are going to talk about something different, and that is related to ancient India.
Yeah, so today we are going to talk about diplomacy in ancient India. As most people know, that diplomacy or diplomatic relation between countries was actually founded by the after the Treaty of Westphalia. But I guess, yes, the modern diplomacy that we have today definitely had its traits after the Westphalian Treaty. But it doesn't mean that the countries does not have diplomatic relation in the ancient India, I'm talking about the 4 BCE, like before Common Era. So yeah, so we're gonna discuss this in detail today. Also, you guys will get to know a lot of things about ancient India today. And yeah, I guess we should actually glorify in ancient
Our
Indian
culture.
history. Yeah,
Yeah,
our culture, our history. So begin with, I guess we should begin with a brief introduction about ancient India because, of course, most of you are not from that field. Also, school, you might have learned about it in school, but we don't remember that much. So to start with the introduction or a brief history, so ancient India was, as we know, I'm talking about the time when the process of empire building started, like the concept that there would be a monarch or republic. Also, one more point that ancient India had a system of both monarch and republics. So yeah, republic system is not new in India. We had it back in it's like we had it around 2000 years back and even more. Like it was called Garsang in Hindi, which means republic, and the meaning is same today also. So most of the hilly terrains of India used to have the republic system, and also our prime minister has talked about it in one of the parliamentary sessions. He mentioned about the Lichavis. So Lichavis existed in the time of I would say that Buddha, Siddharth Gautam, as we know, and also it continued to it continued to what we say exist even during the time of Gupta Empire. So I mean, most of you would know that there was Gupta Empire and also the time of Gautam Buddha, which was before Common Era. So we see that they had a very long history. Also, they were not a very prominent kingdom in India, but yes, they were a very important kingdom when it comes to understanding the history. So Lichavis were one of the oldest republics in India that used to exist. Also, there were a lot of republics, not only Lichavis, but Lichavis are one of the most important. So
hmm,
yeah, and also during the time and all, and first we'll discuss that. Okay, I guess this intro I'll keep on providing the background throughout. So
hmm.
we'll start with the first point, that why it was important to have a soft power, or the need for diplomacy. So I guess it all started because earlier when we say that wars used to happen, like most people think that India was a very hostile country back in the day. There used to be a lot of wars and stuff, but that is partially not true, because India has always been a welfare state. So yes, it also looked after its people. So it all started in the, I guess, 4th century BC, like before Common Era, when the Mauryan kings fought with the Greeks, because the Greeks, we all know the story of Alexander, and I don't understand why they call it great, but I don't call him great, so I would just call him Alexander. So he came to India, I guess, in 325 BC, and he tried capturing, but of course, like Western philosophers, they say that yeah, he actually just was amazed by the valor of the local kings and he went back. But I don't think that's the case, because I think that it was because he of course there might be like both the parties would have been strong, but it was not the case that Alexander was much stronger than him, than the local kings. So I guess it would be like, yeah.
Famous tale of King Porus and Alexander.
Yes.
There is this famous tale of King Porus and Alexander. Right?
Yeah, But yeah, I mean, Western historians have different theory about Alexander, and Indian ones have different. So I don't follow both of them in the same context. But I guess that what happened between Alexander and the local king, due to which he left India, was a different story. But I don't believe that he left because he was so amazed by the valor. There must be some other side of the story too. And also, it is said that his soldiers denied to go forward towards the mainstream India because of the glory of Maurya Empire at that time. I guess it was Dhananand who was the king in India, and he had a very very strong army, and even all the foreigners knew about it. So of course the soldiers of Alexander refused to go, but he left his you know people to rule around in the northwestern part of India. And when Chandragupta Maurya came to power after Dhananan, of course, then he tried to capture the northwest India. So he fought with the Greeks and he defeated them. And they were all asked to go back to Greek. But then he understood that, I mean, we see that Indian kings have always understood the importance of soft power. That's why matrimonial alliances were there. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Not
we
just internationally, but also nationally, right?
yes, of course,
And
uh,
locally.
locally. So he married a Greek princess. Most of us know about Helena.
Yeah, yeah, we
Yeah.
do.
So that was a kind of symbol of extending his soft power because he married their princess, and also that was the first time a Greek ambassador was sent to India, and his name was Megasthenes. Now, most of us would know about Megasthenes because he also is known as the first Greek ambassador to India. So we see when we say Greek ambassador, we understand that this is diplomatic relation. Megasthenes was in the court of Chandragupta Maurya for like 7 years. He stayed in Patliputra and he also wrote about the Indian history and culture. And it is also a very good source for understanding history. So we understand that diplomatic relations used to be there. And this is not the only case when the diplomatic relations were there. Even after Megasthenes, there were a lot of ambassadors which Greeks sent in order to maintain their relation with the Mauryan Empire. And most of the Greek ambassadors which came to India were so mesmerized by the Indian culture that there used to be a process called Indianization when ambassadors or the Greeks came to India and were like in awe of the Indian culture, and most of them, actually converted to either Brahmanical religions or Buddhism or Jainism. There are instances that the ambassadors converted to Hinduism and also named themselves on the behalf of the Indian gods like Vishnu. One of them actually converted and was named himself Vishnu Gupta or something. Sorry, not Vishnu Gupta was the Kautilya, but I guess it was from he related to Vaishnavism, the which I don't remember the exact name, but he actually followed Vaishnavism. And one more, actually not one, many of the ambassadors which came to India from the Greeks actually converted to Buddhism, Jainism, and Brahmanical religion. Also, most of them mostly converted to Buddhism because Buddhism was at its peak at that time.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we'll also move on to the next thing, that the kind of relations we had with China and Southeast Asia and also the Northwestern Asia. So to talk about the relations with Northwest Asia, uh, or the Central Asia, we all know that India used to have a very, very strong relation, or we can say it just might be a trade relation, but we had relation with Northwest Asia since Indus Valley Civilization. So Indus Valley Civilization happened 3,500 years ago. So yeah, we had a very, very strong relation with the Central Asia's like the today's region of Iran, Iraq, and also the Central Asian, like the nomadic tribes of Central Asian. There used to be a trade relation. They used to had a trade relation with them. So yeah, also yeah.
nothing. Carry on.
Yeah. Also, like India, like me, most of us know that India was India had a very flourishing of uh, you know uh, shipbuilding activities. India was one of the best countries or the best places where shipbuilding technology was found. So, of course, because we had oceans around us, so our shipbuilding process flourished. Although the British says that Indians were, uncivilized people, we civilized them. But when all the Europe was, mm, trying or understanding what culture is, we had a very vibrant culture. And not only culture, we had trade links to Southeast Asia, China, and also to the area of Kazakhstan, Tashkent, that kind of areas. Even there are some instances about Kashmir king who actually went to Tashkent. You understand where is Tashkent in Central Asia? He captured till there. So of course, India had a very rich history, which was actually, most of the British tried their best to, erase our histories, but there's a tendency about history. You can never erase it.
Which I mean, even the people of India, the students of India, don't know so much about their
Yeah.
glorious past.
Yes, actually, the thing is that we Indians are taught, maybe because of the British school education system, that we are very, peace-loving people. We don't go to wars because we are very naturally very, peace. We are very naturally, non-violence type of people. But that's not true. If we see in the local levels or in the personal levels, we Indians are very furious people.
Yes.
If someone does something wrong to you, you start shouting and you start doing things like that's I'm talking about normal instances. So how can you say that India is a very peace loving nation? Its citizens are really believes in non-violence. Of course we believe in tolerance. India has from time and again believed in tolerance. We do not do this communal thing here since ancient time. Like in ancient time also we had a lot of religions. We had Jainism, Buddhism, Brahmanical religions. And I don't say Hinduism then, because back then it was believed that Hinduism, there was nothing called Hinduism. It was always a Brahmanical religion, because Hinduism in its it in its initial, or I would say its specific term, is not a religion. It's a way of life. So that's why I mostly prefer the Hinduism today is not what we had back then. Today we have a religion that's called Hinduism, but back then it was Brahmanism, because there was a concept of Brahmins and non-Brahmins, and it is mostly called a Vedic, religion. So back then there was no concept of Hinduism. That's why I don't term it as Hinduism. But I don't think there's a much difference. We adopted it later on and gave it a name, because initially it was just a way of living. Like Hinduism was mostly termed as a terminology used to define a certain way of living, like vegetarianism, no alcoholism, and also a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So coming back to our diplomatic relations, we had very good diplomatic relations with China. Okay, talking about this today, I feel like, oh my god, can China be this good someday? Of course, yeah, there used to be Tang, uh, you know
Yeah. There were a lot of
Tang
Huan
Tang
Sang,
Yeah,
Iron, and so
actually,
people.
you are Fahian. Fahian came back during the time of Mauryan Empire, and he wrote a lot about the Mauryan kings and the culture of history, and of course, and yeah, Fahian came to India, I guess, yeah, during the Mauryan Empire. And Fayan had had undergone a tragedy, in which when he was going back to China, actually he came to India through land route, but
Okay.
he had to go through sea route.
Okay.
So when he was going back to China, his around near the areas of now Indonesia, where we have Indonesia now. He was actually the his ship was struck by a very big storm, large type of storm. And
Okay.
people thought that we could not survive and we could not go ahead of it. And so most of the, so every passenger were told to, what we say, like, give away with their, belongings,
So yeah,
because yeah.
just to
Huh.
reduce the weight of the ship.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, Fahian gave away with everything, his personal things, but he didn't wanted to, give away with records and writings he actually, accumulated over these years, because he actually studied in Nalanda. He was
Yeah,
there. He was
those
there for a
things were
long
very
time.
important.
Yeah,
All those things were indeed very important.
yeah, but he had to give away with them. And he only
Of
kept
course,
a
man.
small statue of Buddha, because he believed that he is the only one who will actually make sure that it survives. So he gave away with everything, but then he went back to China and wrote about his experiences. So the book Fahian wrote uh, is also a, very good source of history for us Indians, and also for people. And he was there for a very very long time. He went to a lot of places. I mean, as Indians, I have not been to so many places that he has been, being a Chinese.
Yeah.
So, and he also mentioned that India is a very tolerant nation, because Buddhism was at its peak back then. The rulers used to be Buddhist, but he never ever did any injustice to other rulers. Of course, there will be some, exceptions. Like, we talk about a ruler from the region of Bengal. He was called Shashank. So he persecuted Buddhists at very large numbers. Matlab, there are very, ambiguities in this. But yeah, he was one of the kings who was, who actually burned the Bodhi tree. So
Okay.
yeah, we say that he's a kind of ruler. But most kings were very very tolerant towards other religions, very very tolerant, because most kings of ancient India were either Buddhist or Jain. And later on, when we talk about the 9th, 10th century, when Vaishnavism and Shaivism was at its peak, then we have the Imperial Cholas. We know about the Imperial Cholas.
Yeah.
They were mostly mostly followed the Shaivism cult. And this cult, came out very late, like in the 9th, 10th century, because earlier it was only either Jain kings or Buddhist kings. And we had very little, Brahmanical kings. Most of them were either Jain or Buddhist. But later on in the 8th, 9th century, when Vaishnavism and Shaivism was at its peak. But if we talk about the 9th century, it was like Shaivism, which was at its peak in the North India, and in the South India, and Vaishnavism in the North India. So that was a time when the Brahmanical, you know, religions were at its peak. But still, uh, there was a lot of tolerance between us. Okay, we strayed away. We should talk about our diplomatic relations with China. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we all know about the King Harshvardhan. I mean, every Indian knows about him. Every Indian, like, in our, even in our households, we say that there was a king who donated everything. He's known as the most benevolent king of history in ancient India, Harshvardhan. So, of course, Harshvardhan also had a, you know very difficult history. His brother-in-law and his brother, both of them were killed by Shashank, the ruler I talked about. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so he you had to, actually take the charges of his empire at a very early age, like in 16. So it was during his time that we started having a very very good relations or with China. And in China it was Tang Empire, if I'm not wrong. So during his time, Fahian came to India, and Fahian is known as, the mentor of Harshvardhana, because Harshvardhan was initially he was he was a Shaivite, but later he actually got converted to Buddhism, and initially got converted to uh, Hinayana and later Mahayana. So Fahian was a Mahayana Buddhist. Okay, to everyone not who don't know about the sects of Buddhist, you don't have to. Just have to know that, yeah, a king who was Buddhist. Yeah, Harshvardhan was a Buddhist king, and yet and also that he is known as the most benevolent king, because he donated everything. like everything except for his army, which he had to keep, and some wealth that which he would use to, give salaries to to the soldiers. Other than that, he actually donated everything, and it's very famous. And like that's why he's very famous. It's there's and we get to know this from a lot of inscriptions. So yeah, this is not false or something. There's no error in it, because of course, uh, after the modern empire, whatever history it is written, it's mostly true, because we get evidences from it. So there's no if buts in it. But yeah, so during his time, Pahian came to India, but Pahian was not a state-sponsored person, so he was not an ambassador. But he had a very good relation with Harshvardhan. He so after Pahian went back to China, a state-sponsored ambassador was sent in the court of Harshvardhan. I guess his name was Itzing, and he stayed here for a very very long time, but had to. But after he left, Harshvardhan died, and the third ambassador, if I second ambassador which came to the court of Guptas, actually defeated the then king. So that happens because uh, that was his history. That's what happens. That if you have diplomatic relations, it doesn't mean that countries can't get hostile against each other. That still happens. So yeah, we had a very very good relations with China, and after that also we had a lot of ambassadors from different parts of the world. India had diplomatic relations with Southeast Asia also. Like if we know about the Chola Empire, they captured till, I mean, not captured, but they had their influence till what to say, Malaysia and whole of Southeast Asia. They even went till Vietnam and Laos. So um, they had actually they were like the influence of the Chola kings were, like in till Southeast Asia, and also we had ambassadors from Southeast Asia sitting in the courts of Chola empires and others. So yeah, diplomatic relations were given a lot of prominence, because the kings understood that you cannot fight every time and you cannot win, because every time, like most people think that Indian kings were very brutal and they only knew the word of swords, but no, that's not true. We also understood the importance of diplomacy. And I say this because, of course, if you don't understand the importance of diplomacy, why would you have matrimonial alliances? That was because uh, to gain the soft power, so that the empire would never ever go against you, because of course if you have matrimonial alliances this won't happen. So yeah, like matrimonial alliances, we also have diplomatic alliances, because the kings uh, knew the importance of diplomacy. And why, and also Ashok, during the time of Ashok, he's also known as the preacher of Buddhism. So even during his time, he sent his children to the to Sri Lanka, which was called Ceylon, I guess, if I'm not wrong, back in the days. And they also had diplomatic relation, like Sri Lanka and India had diplomatic relation during the time of Ashok. Ashok.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a very very uh, long and vivid diplomatic history. India has a very strong diplomatic history. So yeah, I guess this was all the part of diplomacy. But maybe we'll talk about the origin of diplomacy in ancient India. So I guess you have to give this credit to Kautilya. He was the scholar who actually prescribed the kings. I mean, yeah, he's called Indian Machiavelli, but I guess Machiavelli came back, very late, like very
Yeah, he
very
was
late.
he was very late.
He
But
came in during the time of unification of Italy. And when was the unification of Italy? It was in the 9th century. Oh my God. And he was in 3rd BCE, before
yeah,
Common Era. So calling him Indian Machiavelli is an insult to him. But you should call Machiavelli in,
um,
Western Chanakya.
Yeah,
I
that's what I was about to say.
Yeah. So of course that's what most of the Europeans did to us. Like during the Gupta Empire, we had a king called Samudragupta, who was very very ambitious and very very ferocious. He is known as the Alexander of East. I mean,
Why? I mean,
seriously.
why so much westernization of our culture?
Yeah,
And I think
actually.
about China, recently it has become so hostile and
Yeah,
so dominant. But earlier, even China has a very very rich cultural history,
yeah.
and I'm glad that they are also proud of this fact because every citizen should be. And
True.
just because China has grown so hostile in the last 100 years does not mean that we will forget their glorious past.
Of course, not also 100 years. I guess this is all because I think the
No,
reason
no, I
behind.
took I took CCP's example, and it has
Yeah,
been 100 years of CCP. So
yeah. Actually, the reason why China has become this hostile is that I mean, now that Xi Jinping is a leader for life, he has to do something very very impacting, that so that there is no obstacles on his way to his lifelong leadership. Because after he became a lifelong leader, there was a pandemic and China's name got dragged into it. China was blamed for it, and the reputation of China overall declined a lot. So now the people of China even resenting him. So he want to do something which will actually unite the whole nation. It's like, if India captures POK, what would be the sentiments of India? Like, we'll be more than glad. And that is what Xi Jinping wants to do. He wants to capture Taiwan, and that is the reason he has become hostile towards, India. Because for that he needs to, decrease or kind of delimit India. Because if like this he goes and tries to capture Taiwan, India would definitely try helping Taiwan, and also maybe India would try getting its extraction back. So
yeah,
yeah, so they want to push Indians to their back foot and then go towards Taiwan, and they want Pakistan as their ally, so that Pakistan keeps on doing its usual shit to India, so that we cannot focus on what it is important, like terrorist things. Like that's what Pakistan do. They keep
yeah,
on terror funding, and this terror funded groups become a pain in the ass for India. So we
yeah,
keep engrossed in it, and China gets its job done. I guess that's the reason. Because of course we had a rivalries with China since a long time. But what we have today was never ever experienced by Indians or Chinese. We never hated each other so much, like
yeah.
the hatred we have today. So yeah, I guess this was for today. Also, we didn't talk about Kautilya's foreign policy because it's to understand that we have to understand a lot of situation and stuff. So maybe we'll make a
Another
different
episode on it.
another episode on it, and we'll just talk about the Kautilya's foreign policy because it's huge, and it's also something which you would understand if you don't know the background. And I am 100% sure that most of us don't know it, because of course, like, we haven't studied that in school, and our education system never focused on Kautilya's or the Indian philosophers
Yeah,
writings. And I guess that's a major setback. Like, we are taught about Western philosophers and stuff in back in school, but we were never. I mean, it's important that we include Indian philosophers' writings in the school levels.
yeah. Because I remember back in our high school days. I mean, in
Yeah.
class 9 or something, we were
Hmm.
reading about the Western Renaissance,
Yeah.
but we never learned about
Yes,
Kautilya as a
I
matter of
even
fact.
back out of school, I didn't know about history at all. I felt, I mean, we weren't taught about the great Mauryan empires or the post Mauryas or the Guptas or the post Guptas. Like, it was just one-liners or stuff. I don't know what we
Yeah,
were taught. We were just taught, I guess, the nationalism and colonialism and some world history part. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, it's important for us to know world history, but we also what happened because because of that. Most of the Indian thinks that our history starts from nationalism and ends with independence.
Yeah,
That's not the
right.
case. Most Indian youths have the similar thought. They didn't know that there used to be kings like Rajendra I or Raja who expanded their kingdoms to all of the southeast. We had kings like that. I don't remember the name of that king who actually went till Tashkent. We don't know about the conquest of Samudragupta, who was a very intelligent king. So we don't know our own history because our education system is made like this by the Brits. They tried including they made our education system in a such a way that we never that we won't be able to understand the glories of our past. We'll just understand that we'll just think that Brits were the one who civilized us. Before them we were just as a hunters gatherers. But the
No,
fact
that
that
is
when
not the
whole of
case.
Europe was hunters gatherers, India was making temples like Meenakshi temple. The You see, matlab, I can't even imagine thinking that how they used to make such temples like 200 pits and something. Like, what is this, bro? I mean, I'm
Yeah,
amazed by the engineering skills. India had a very artistic engineers and traders.
yeah.
We
I mean,
had
India
it
still
was
has a large number of
Yeah,
engineers, and this is
yeah,
something we're proud of.
of course. And also, like during the Gupta age, we they made a pillow in Mehrauli, which is still there, and it is made from rust-free iron. You imagine during the Gupta age,
Wow.
like in the fifth, sixth century, they make a pillar rust-free, and it's still rust-free, bro. It doesn't rust. So the technology, I mean, our contribution towards art science was huge, but we were just like we were never given credit for what we had. And we are not even, and even today after like 70 years of independence, we are not taught what we were, what our forefathers were.
All
We are
thanks to
just,
this
yeah,
westernization of our education system.
of course. Yeah, like back in the days we had universities like Takshila, Nalanda, and also Vallavi. We had such amazing institutes of learning where foreigners used to come and learn. And today we Indians go to foreign countries to for education, because of course it was really disregarded. We never gave priority to what we had. And I would say that it was just the Brits or the foreigners. I would also blame our government after the independence, who never actually thought of Indianizing things back, which were westernized. And I say it that yeah, Indianization should be done, because that's our history, that's our part. You can never grow without, you know you can never grow if you are not actually tied to your roots.
Yeah,
Never
I
forget
mean,
your
even
roots.
Shashi Tharoor says it that if you do not know about your past, you will never
Hmm.
know where you are going to go
Huh,
in
of
future.
course, it's very important to know about our past in order to understand the future. That's the reason most of the youths today are, just blindly following Western cultures, doing things that I mean, that's not even meant for us. Like, I know people who celebrate Thanksgiving. Oh my
What?
God.
I mean, I don't even know why Thanksgiving is celebrated. I just know that it's
I
celebrated in November.
I mean, oh my God, what is this? Why
I mean,
are you
Halloween,
celebrating?
I
Huh?
understand why you guys celebrate Halloween because it's fun and
Yeah.
it's okay to celebrate Halloween, but Thanksgiving, I think
Yeah.
it is because Americans do their harvesting, they harvest their
Huh.
crops or something. So even in
Yeah.
India, we harvest our crops during Makar
Yeah.
Sankranti. So why don't you celebrate that?
Of course. So
I mean, you don't
the
even go and wish on social media that
of
happy Makar
course.
Sankranti and something like that. So
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that need to be, set right. Even now, after so many years of our independence, we are still not. I don't know why we are not setting things right. I think the youth needs to understand their history. That no, we don't have a history of, bro, only 80 or 200 years. When the Brits came, we had a history of more than 4,000 years.
yeah, we indeed do. And this
Yeah.
podcast actually aims to do that. I mean,
Yeah,
making people aware not only on the geopolitical issues but also on issues like this.
yeah. Yeah, we mostly focus on the geopolitics because it's important for us to know. But sometimes you won't be able to understand the geopolitics if you don't know the history of your
Yeah,
own country's geopolitics back in the days. So it's very important. Today's episode was all about the geopolitics in the ancient India. You understand the relations, how we were connected to the Southeast Asia, Southwest Asia, sorry, Northwest Asia, Central Asia, and
yeah.
China. So that's, I
And
guess,
the fact that we hate China right now, but it is not that we hate
yeah.
its past because it was very glorious,
Hmm.
and no one can deny that.
Of course, actually, the after the Pahian wrote his book, people from China really praised Harshvardhan as their, god. They liked him so much that for them he was like their god. So you understand how much they loved the an Indian king, because he was the face of Buddhism at that time. Also, so was Ashok. Ashok was
Yeah,
also the face of Buddhism. Harshvardhan was the face of Buddhism, and the Chinese people, most of the Chinese travelers or the Chinese people wanted to visit India, see its glory, and most of them wrote about it, and they told the world that India has such a vibrant past, that India has such a vibrant history, culture. Like when most of the world didn't have a settled life, we were trading agricultural products.
yeah.
So yeah. Also, not to forget our Indus Valley civilization's town planning.
We'll talk about that in the later episodes.
Yeah,
And we just hope that you like this concept, that apart from geopolitics, we're also covering, ancient Indian history, because that's
yeah,
very important for people to know. And even the people who are not Indian but are, interested in our culture, I think this
yeah.
podcast even serves them.
Of course. So
So
I guess we'll
we'll end here,
yeah.
and bye bye.
Bye bye.